A very good morning to all of you. My name is Ducheyne. I am a consultant working for Autolit, but I'm also a member of the board of the European Association of People Management. And I'm today in Lisbon for the Delegates Assembly, the General Assembly of that association. It's a pleasure to be here for the second time in this Inspirathon. It's a crazy idea, and Matt has to do it. And I'm going to host a couple of speakers today. We'll start also with my own talk on organizational resilience. Don't forget, this is a live session, but it's also recorded, and so you can always look at all the recordings later. Don't forget to ask your questions or give your comments. We'll try also to give some answers. And so here we go then. I'm going to open my presentation and start with this topic on organizational resilience. Now, it's been a topic that's since COVID, we've been talking about resilience a lot, but of course, it's in itself not new. And uh, I take you back to 2015 when there were in Paris, there were some terrorist attacks, horrible events took place there with many casualties. And then uh, we would have thought, okay, will we ever go back to normal? And so for months, situation was tense. But then again, the city of Paris came back to a certain kind of normality, but it has adapted to that situation, and that's already 8 years ago. But it's today very fresh that we should really think about how can we overcome setbacks, how can we progress when things are difficult. um, a couple of days ago in Brussels, there was a terrorist attack on two soccer fans from Sweden. So horrible to see that. Well, the city of Brussels will adapt to that. Belgium will adapt to that. The world will adapt to everything that is happening, and that is actually resilience. Organizational resilience is a quality that enables organizations to anticipate, to cope with, to adapt to, and recover from disruptions. So it's not only recovering, it's also anticipating. I think that we should never forget that things will happen, setbacks will come, and so we should be able to anticipate. This is crucial. And there is no verb that says will resiliate. That doesn't exist as a verb. So it's not something that we do. We don't resiliate, but we can be resilient. And resilience is a consequence of other things. And I'm going to talk about that today. Now, if you look at adapting, coping, anticipating, on the left-hand side, you see some long-term trends that influence our organizations, that influence our societies. And if you look at climate change, this year and last year, we had some hurricanes, we have had some fires, we have had floods, and it seems that they are occurring more often and much more vigorously. So, and then we could say, well, we're surprised by that, but we knew since 1972, at latest, that climate change is happening, because there was at that time a report. And so the trends of climate change has been there for more than 50 years, and nevertheless we seem to be surprised by the current events, by the crisis that is occurring. And you see a lot of things that are long term there, but we don't anticipate, we don't react. With climate change, we can say that we didn't do much, and that we are now in a hurry. Uh, and so we'll probably take some hits there. This is the curve of resilience. You see on the left, you see actually a gradually growing organization or growing society, and suddenly something happens and you get a hit. But resilience makes you go back up after a while, sometimes fast, sometimes not fast. This is the curve of resilience. Organizations that are not able to take that second curve up, they are probably not robust, not resilient, but probably they will get back to certain a certain level, but lower than before, or they will perish. And that's what's happened to Kodak. That's what happened to other organizations. Now, some examples of this curve, just to show that it's a real thing and it's not just invented. Percent of evolution of the GDP in Europe, and there you see the crisis in 2008, the financial crisis, and you see COVID, and you see the hit that this growth curve has taken. This is another graph where you see the evolution of temp agency work in Belgium. There you see in 2020 the hit taken by COVID, and then the restoration. But there you see it's not complete, the restoration, because it's going down again. So there is resilience, but not totally. And this is the unemployment in the US, and there you see the rise in unemployment. In 2020 again, it went from 4 or 5% to 15%. Of course, you should reverse it. This is the employment rate. Then you see there the hit taken in 2020. So this curve comes back all the time, and we can have different responses to disruption. And the response can be that you're very robust. This is an organization, Congo Gumi. It's been founded in the 6th century, and it still exists. It's no longer independent because it's been taken over by a construction company. And what does Congo Gumi do? They build temples, they restore temples in Japan. So they are very traditional. And so they've had 1,500 years of history. And the reason why they were taken over is that temples, well, you could say this is not a future-proof undertaking, but temples are increasingly made out of concrete, and concrete is not their thing. And so to adapt to that situation, they had to go along with another organization to bring in that knowledge. But they still exist, they still function after more than 1,500 years. And so as an organization, when something happens, you can be robust. It means you don't feel anything. You can be resilient. That means you will come back to certain adapted functioning, or you can be very fragile, and maybe you will come back to a persistent dysfunctioning, like I said. So these are some examples of organizations. I have Apple as an example, but Apple in the 90s was not resilient. It was always almost bankrupt. It was almost gone. Um, and so it restored itself afterwards, but it was a close call. And in this century, or in this decade, it's been resilient. And if you look at the valuation of that organization, it's tremendous. But we can only judge resilience with hindsight. It means that we can look back and say, well, we've been resilient, and that company has been resilient. And so therefore it's always good to develop capabilities. I call them super apps, to develop the capabilities that you will need to be resilient in the future. If you are waiting until something happens, you might survive, you might get through, but chances are bigger that you will be less resilient. Now, doing nothing is not the right strategy when you're facing turbulence. And doing nothing, an expensive word for that is inertia. Inertia is actually the main reason why an organization is unable to cope with disruptions, with change. Inertia makes us stay at the same level. It's like a kind of sedation that you have as an organization, which makes you slow, which makes you not fast enough. And so if you have inertia, your strategy becomes a tunnel, your processes become bad habits, your relationships become obligations, your values become dogmas, very, very rigid thinking. And flagship products might become milking cows, but you don't have a succession in terms of products, so you know where this is going to lead. All products will end someday. So adaptability is this first super app, this first capability that makes an organization resilient. And of course, there are three moments to adapt: before, during, and afterwards. So before something happens is the best time to build that adaptability. It's anticipation, it's being prepared. Whilst afterwards, you might be too late. You can only learn, and you can adapt after the facts. And during most of the times, we will cope during a setback and a disruption, and that's a close call. So before is always the best time to do it, and the message is then change as much as possible, as soon as possible, as often as possible. Sometimes we say, well, actually, we should consolidate, and that is true. You don't have to change everything all the time, but you have to change something all the time, to always adapt and anticipate. Now, many organizations are not prepared for this adaptability. And one of the things that is keeping them away from it is the organizational structure, the silos that are created. And so when you want to change something before it happens, you will always have this battle for resources. It's my budget, it's my target, it's my plan. If you don't have collaboration during a setback, you will have always the lack of coordination. You will waste time with negotiations internally, competition, and so on. And afterwards, of course, you will have different interpretations, different priorities, and some units might say, well, actually, we go back to before, and we don't need to change, whilst maybe they're totally wrong. So collaboration is the second super app that makes organizations resilient. Um, and adaptability without collaboration, that's just chaos because it's not coordinated. Strategies without collaboration are just bound to fail. And so that's why you have to focus on that collaboration, which starts at the top. Many management teams do not work well at all. I'm working with many management teams, in my job, in my profession, and I always start there, because if it's not going well there, then yeah, chances are very high that collaboration in the entire organization is not top. Um, and even if you think management teams work well, they can always do better. So collaboration needs this focus, and we need to invest in it and review it totally, because without that, we'll be lost. Of course, we need a sense of direction. Here you see the painting by Bruegel about it's the Tower of Babel. Why didn't we build it? It's a legend. It comes from the Bible. We didn't build it because God didn't want us to go to the heavens, and He created different languages, so people didn't understand each other. Of course, it's a legend, but we need a sense of direction. We need to have a common sense of direction, and this is an example of a hospital where sometimes factions do not work together, but you need that story, that one story, one purpose, to which you can combine, for instance, your medical story, your nursing story, your facility story, and so on. So you really need this collaboration based on purpose, on a direction, a sense of direction that you need. And so purpose is the third super app. If you can make sense out of it, if there's turbulence and you can make sense out of it, and you can say, well, actually, we know that the sea is rough, but we go in that direction. Maybe we'll have to make some detours, but it's still a sense of direction. So purpose is a third super app that makes you resilient over time. And if you don't have it, people will only feel lost. When something happens, they will say, well, actually, we've lost something, and they will not have a sense of meaning, which will make them maybe panicking or despairing, and so on. So we need this sense of direction. It gives meaning, it gives motivation to continue and to change. Change and collaboration without purpose, that's just not sustainable. You cannot change without purpose, and collaboration needs a common goal. So these three super apps together are foundational capabilities that enable organizations to progress. Collaboration, purpose, and adaptability allow you to go further, even though maybe the situation is dire, maybe when the situation is rough. Now, to make this work, we need a fourth one. Uh, trust is making adaptability, collaboration, and purpose much more easy. And so the fourth super app that I would like to introduce is trust. If we have trust within the organization, if people have faith that things will go right, if they have trust in their management, if they have trust in their products, if they trust that they will be able to do it, so they have trust in themselves, then of course everything becomes more easier. And organizations that are lower on trust, they really have a a difficult time to go through a disruption. And so what you need is trustworthy leadership, leadership that inspires trust. And you do that by focusing on a couple of things. If you want to be trustworthy as a leader, you will you will have to be competent. That's the first thing. You will not be trustworthy when you're not seen as competent as a leader. You will have to be loyal. That means that you have to show that what you do is in the interest of the organization and of the people. And you have to be integer, honest, ethical. So this is actually important for leadership. That if you don't have these three, you won't be trustworthy. Trustworthy leadership also creates psychological safety. I know we are overusing this term. It's like a recipe for everything, but imagine that people don't feel safe in their organization. What would that be then? They won't adapt so easily because adapting would be a risk. They won't be creative. They won't generate ideas because of the lack of safety. Collaboration is difficult without safety because collaboration is again a risk. If they cannot trust people within their organization to be loyal towards them, so then they won't do that. If they cannot speak up, if they cannot be themselves, people won't engage in those behaviors that are necessary for these foundational capabilities. So psychological safety is actually a hygienic condition for that. And then architecture of choice, what's that? Well, it's about autonomy. If people cannot be trusted, if people are not trusted by their management, and if you don't give people a choice, then you have actually an issue. So resilience will never arise when people are afraid, when they have no choices, and when there's no trust in their leadership. If that's the case, then you will have a difficult time in being resilient. And remember, we do not resiliate. It is a consequence of all these behaviors that we have, all these behaviors that constitute then the resilience of an organization. Now, coming back to that leadership, making sure that these capabilities are alive, that they are developed, that is a matter of leadership. But we can be leaders as a role, as a function, but we can also be leaders based on our character. And so when a leader is empathetic, fair, kind, reciprocal, when he's both, or when they're both demanding but also supportive, when they're looking at the future but also at the present, then you will have sustainable leadership for this. So my message is really to treat trust as the first output of leadership. If it's not there, it is difficult. And you have to build trust in times of prosperity. It is too late to say, please trust me, if in the previous period when everything was bright and sunny, when you haven't invested in trustworthiness. If people don't trust you before, they won't trust you during a disruption. So trust, I cannot stress it enough, is actually the basis of everything. Well, some takeaways that I get, and I see that I'm faster than anticipated, so there will be time for some questions. But resilience is a quality. It's not a capability in itself. You really have to focus on those four foundational capabilities: adaptability, collaboration, purpose, and of course trust, to make sure that your organization will be resilient during a period of turbulence. And we know those periods will be there. We'll only have turbulence. So these four super apps, I call them, foundational capabilities, are crucial. And as a leader, you need to develop them. As an organization, you need to develop them. And the best moment to do that is when all is well. So before something happens. So then you have to prepare for the disruption by building those capabilities. Now, someone might ask me, okay, that's fine, but organizational resilience, this is like on a high level. What about the individual people? Of course, organizations do not behave. They don't behave. It's the people in the organization that behave. And of course, strategies do not fail or do not succeed. It's the people executing them that who will fail or succeed. So individual behavior constitutes, of course, these capabilities, but there's more to that. If you want to have these capabilities develop, you really have to make sure that leadership, but also technology, processes, structure, culture, and individual behavior are coherent. You have to build for consistency. And so all the bad habits that organizations have, you have to get rid of them, because they will um, inhibit this, they will stop behaviors of occurring. If I want people to collaborate, but I don't give targets to the whole organization, and I just divide targets, they will not collaborate. People will not collaborate if they have only personal targets. If I want people to be adaptable, but I have a very strong, heavy procedure for small stuff, and I don't give them the choice, then they won't adapt, because the context doesn't allow them to adapt. So individual behavior is crucial, but as leaders, it's best to create a context, an environment where those capabilities can occur, where those behaviors can occur. And that's what you have to focus on when you are doing organizational development. You must really focus on not so much on the individual behavior, but on the organizational aspects that enable that behavior. And so that's so important. So the best moment to develop that resilience is before, but it all depends on that human behavior, that individual behavior, that is crucial.